I'm going to show you how to use a router bushing and a router bit to get clean, accurate, repeatable cuts. I'm Ron Paulk, and this is the Smart Wood Shop. If you'd like to get a detailed set of plans to build a smart wood shop or one of my workbenches for yourself, there's a link in the description of this video down below where you can go directly to my store, purchase a set of plans, and download them 24/7, 365. One of the most common questions that I get asked in the comments to my videos as well as in email is about router bushings. There's a variety of questions, but they all circle around understanding how router bushings work. So I want to take a few minutes to explain it and demonstrate it today. To begin with, understand that this is very, very simple. It's easy to understand, and once you start doing it, you're going to find that the router truly is the most versatile saw available to the woodworker. A bushing is simply an inexpensive add-on to any router on the market that, when attached, will allow your router to follow exactly a pattern. A pattern is nothing more than an edge that the bushing follows. This is a guide to tell your router exactly where to cut. And because you're using a pattern, you get the same cut over and over again. If you need multiple parts like this to be exactly the same time and time again, then taking the time to cut out a pattern accurately for your bushing to follow, there's really no way to do it more efficiently and faster. Wait a minute, I know about CNC machines, I love CNC machines, but I'm speaking to the typical woodworker, or like me, the portable carpenter, the mobile carpenter. I can't take a CNC machine with me to the job, no matter how small they are. The time to set them up and just the physical size and carrying them eliminates them from one of my options. And there are some portable CNC routers out there as well. I'm going to set all of those aside. This bushing is about a $7 part at most. And if you buy it in a kit, the way I do, so you have multiple sizes, they end up being about $4 to $5 a piece. So these are very inexpensive, and you've already got a router and you've already got router bits. This inexpensive addition will allow you to extend tools that you already have and do things on the job at a level you can't do with any other tool. Whatever shape it is, just follows that edge. On an inside cut, it's a round bit, so it's going to round your corners. Obviously, if you don't want a round corner, then you can cut that out with, say, like a Ryobi saw or a jigsaw. But in my case, I really like these soft rounded corners, and I think it's a nice aesthetic. There is another option that will give you the same results as a bushing, and that is a pattern bit. A pattern bit is a cutter, a straight cutter with a bearing on the top between where it mounts to the router and the cutter. It is not another bit that looks very much the same with the bearing on the bottom. This is a flush cutter. These are used a lot when you're flushing up laminates to countertops and flush cutting and things like that. It will follow, just the way a bushing will, it will follow that edge and give you an exact cut. Very good results. The reason that I do not use these except in certain applications is these are prone to error. And as experienced as I am and as much routing as I have done over the past 30 years, I still make mistakes with these. And the reason is that this bearing moves up and down as you plunge in. This bearing is your contact point, and it's exactly the size of your cutter. So if I'm going against my pattern, my edge, and I'm plunging in, I have to make sure that I get that bearing right to that edge and keep it there, because if I move above it, I'll cut into the pattern and then mess up my cut piece, or if I accidentally slip below it. The other thing that happens is this is a bearing, and If you spin it too fast or if it gets old, these can seize up and cause some other problems. In a future video and lots of other videos, you'll see me use these in router tables, and there's a reason why. They work really well for inlays and cuts where you're matching things up. Because the downside to a bushing is that your cutter is inside of the bushing and it's smaller than the bushing outside diameter. So what happens is when you make your cut, it's going to leave a little more wood than your pattern. So you need to consider that when you're making your pattern. But this is where it's very, very simple. It doesn't matter if you're using a 1/2 inch bit, like I have chucked into the router there, and the appropriate bushing, or you're using one like this, a 1/4 inch with the appropriate bushing, or any size in between. It's the difference between the diameter of your cutter and the outside diameter of your bushing. If you match these up, they are a differential of 1/8 of an inch. In millimeters, which I work in, that's about 3 millimeters. So I need to consider that when I'm making my pattern. Now, it doesn't mean that I make my pattern 3 millimeters smaller. I actually move that edge that it's going to follow half of that distance, because remember, when I'm cutting it, the outside diameter, that's the diameter, is that 1/8 of an inch. So I'm only going to be extending my cut, leaving extra wood half of that, because I'm following that one edge and only cutting one side. So it's 1/16. So if I have a line I want to cut, and I'm using a straight line as an example, but it can be a circle, it can be a diamond, a star, a curve. That edge that I'm following, I'm going to have my pattern an additional 1/16 of an inch away from where I want my final cut. And that's what I'm going to get time and time again with this. So the math is really easy. It doesn't matter, again, if I'm using a 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch. The end cut is the same. I get asked that question like, what size bit do you use? Well, the answer is I use a 1/2 inch router bit, upcut spiral, although you can use a straight cutter. I just get a better cut with these. I use solid carbide because they are a much better value. They cost a lot more money than high-speed steel, but they last a lot longer. So money out of pocket up front, bit more value, long-term use, amortized, far less expensive. To be very clear, if I use a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch, my end cut is the same. The reason I use a 1/2 inch is I like the weight of it, the stability. The bit itself seems to be more stable. Maybe there's less vibration or movement in it. There are times, though, that I need to use a 1/4 inch. The outside diameter for the 1/4 inch is 3/8. If I have a pattern that has an opening smaller than the 5/8 that it requires for a 1/2 inch, on this pattern, for example, I can cut everything out inside and outside with my 1/2 inch bit, except for this slot. This slot is smaller than the 5/8 diameter for the 1/2 inch bit. It will not fit in there. So then I have to drop back and use my 1/4 inch to make that cut. Now I can use this 1/4 inch setup to do the whole thing, but I find that the bigger bit is smoother, quieter, it's less fatiguing, it's just a better setup to go with. On occasion though, I will use the all 1/4 because my cordless router will not chuck in a 1/2 inch bit and all I can use is a 1/4. And so if I want to be cordless for some reason, then you'll see me using the 1/4 inch when I might prefer to use the 1/2 inch. A pattern can be a permanent fixture. Back against the wall there, I have at least 50, 75 patterns that I use over and over again for my workbenches and different things. I need the same cut over and over again. Spent the time making the pattern. I make those patterns out of 1/2 inch plywood. That's my material of choice. I label them, I save them, and I really get my value out of those. There are times though that making a permanent pattern isn't really necessary. When I'm working on prototyping and I'm not sure where I'm going and I need to do some test cuts, before I spend the time on a pattern, I want to get things dialed in. Other times when I only need to cut one, and that's all I'll ever cut, but I want the accuracy and the cleanness, then I don't want to make a pattern, or at least a permanent pattern. And in this case, I need to make 2 of these, but only 2. I have these in varying sizes, but I'm working these out. This is prototyping right now. Eventually, once I have it dialed in, I will make various patterns that look just like this of different sizes. But for now, I just want to make these. So I am ripping the material to width with my track saw, and then I'm taking my track saw and cutting angles, and I'm getting it exactly the way I want it. But I want to cut out this inside, and I want it nice and clean like that. Now I've done this one already. I could lay this one on top of it, use this as a pattern. The dilemma would be that the cutout would be 1/16 in on every edge, or in total, it would shrink by 1/8 of an inch, top to bottom and side to side. Now it really doesn't matter in this situation, and a lot of times I do that when it's just more aesthetic, where you're really not going to pick it up with your eye. But I did this one with a temporary pattern that I'm going to show you how to make and that I use a lot. And I'm going to go ahead and do that on this piece to show you how I did it. I said that a pattern is nothing more than an edge, and so I'm going to make this shape with a bunch of straight edges. I know that I want the finished cut, the material that's left, to be 2 inches. So what I will do is just go around the perimeter of this, and I'm going to make a mark, but I'm not going to make a 2-inch mark. I'm going to make it 1 15/16. I'm going to take 1/16 away, move it away, because I know that when I make that cut with that bushing, it's going to add that 16th back in. Now I don't need to make lines to see where this is. I can just put my pieces on. But to visualize it for the camera and also for me to make sure I get it right, I'm going to go ahead and sketch this out. So with my marks, I'm going to just take any straight edge. So I've made my marks in 1 15/16 all the way around. And all I need to do now is attach some straight edges so that my bushing can follow that and give me this cutout. I can attach this edge in many different ways. I can clamp it. I can use double stick tape. If I'm working on something finished, like a bookcase, working with maple or something, I don't want to put holes in it. If it's paint grade, I may go ahead and use screws, or actually pin nails. Can hold it in with pin nails. They're smaller than screw holes. But in this case, this is a shop tool, and I don't care that I will have the screw holes in the finish. If I want to cover it, I can put a little wood filler in, but it really doesn't matter in this case, and it's the fastest way to do it. So I've created a temporary pattern out of scrap plywood, and I didn't have to do a lot of time cutting to specific dimensions, except for this one piece here. Everything else just floats by. When I get into this corner here, my bushing is going to round this corner out. It's not going to go down to that point. The same here, where you see this big gap, that isn't going to matter. The bushing is going to follow that straight edge, and it's actually going to round these corners slightly. This is where the diameter of the bit can vary your outcome. If this is done with a 1/2 inch bit, if I did it with a 1/4, these corners would be a smaller radius because the diameter of the bit is half as much. I have my 1/2 inch cutter chucked into the router, plunge base router, and I have my bushing that's sized for this bit, which is 5/8 of an inch outside diameter. And so the bit will just go inside but not make contact with the bushing. The last setup I need to do is set the depth of the cut. I don't want to go too deep and cut into my bench or cut my sacrificial strips too much, because I want them to last for a long time. So what I'll do is just take my plunge router and I will push down and touch the wood, and then that zeroes it out. So at this point, I wouldn't cut anything if I ran my router. What I want to do is, I know that this is 18 millimeter wood, so I want to cut 18 millimeters plus a little bit just to get a clean cut on that bottom side. So I will take my stop, I'm going to set it to 0. That zeroes everything out. So the cutter is sticking to the proper depth for 0, and I've got the stop set at 0. And now all I have to do is, and again, this will vary from router to router, but it'll be the same operation. This is millimeter. Yours may be imperial, whatever depth you want. I'm just going to now slide I've got this zeroed out. I'm going to slide the indicator up until it's at 20 millimeters, which will give me my 18 millimeters plus an extra 2 to get a clean cut on the other side. So now when I plunge in, this stop is going to limit the depth of my cut to 20 millimeters. So now I don't have to think about anything, just make the cut. What you'll see me do is you'll see me plunge in and make a very shallow cut. Then I'll plunge in a little bit more, make a little deeper cut, and I'm going to work my way through. I'm not going to plow through 18 millimeters in one pass, which is another advantage over a pattern bit. A pattern bit, you cannot do incremental cutting. That's how you get into trouble. You only have the range that this bearing is, and so when I plunge in, I have to be out here to plunge in and pull back into the pattern, whereas because the bushing is a fixed point, it does not move, I can pull that right up to my pattern. It's not going to cut anything. That's not going to cut my patterns. It's not going to cut anything. It's just a guide. It's not a cutter. So I can pull that right up, and then I can plunge in just a little bit and a little bit more and get a nice cut. Cannot do that with a pattern bit. Now that I've finished the cut and cleaned up, I'm going to do one more pass. I always do this to get a nice clean cut. I have 2 identical pieces that I cut in just a few minutes, and it looks every bit as good as if it were cut on a CNC machine. If you enjoyed this video, if you learned anything, be sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe. And it's really important when you subscribe to click that little bell next to it so you'll know when I put up a new video. Also, if you get a chance, share this channel with somebody else you know. Thanks for dropping into the Smart Woodshop. You stay safe and have a great day.